Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Maureen Manning. I'm the Senior Vice President at the PI, and I'm excited to chat with you today. We've got some experts in the room who are going to share with us about how to identify, support, and retain highly talented local representatives in region with specific linguistic or cultural needs. We're also going to hear from our experts today to get actionable recommendations to optimize recruitment approaches. So I'm excited to welcome our panelists today. And I'd love to start by having you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and what brings you to this work.
So I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you everyone for joining us as well. My name is Hannah Gurman. I am Associate Director of International Admissions at the University of Cincinnati. I've been in this role for about 4 years now and manage everything from our global in-country staff to our agent partnerships to different territories and countries throughout the world. So it's really been a passion of mine for these last 4 years that I never even knew I had, working with students in every different country in every part of the world, but also the incredible staff and really just seeing the differences that we're making in these students' lives. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Islam Lafi, and I'm the MENA Associate Director at Grok. I'm based in the lovely Amman in Jordan. So a really nice location. I'm sure you guys are excited to visit at one point. Anyway, I've been in the industry for over 11 years. I have done different roles with different capacities. I started in this industry by absolute chance, started out with a little stint as a school counselor and then moved to working with an agency, then worked with 2 different pathway providers, Study Group and Into, managing their North America portfolio within the region. And I've been with Grok for the past a little over a year and a half. And I can always say that this is my calling and I absolutely love this industry. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Rosario Vasquez. I started in this industry in 2017, kind of like very similar to Islam. It was really much by chance. I had one of my professors from uni. She really wanted me to be her assistant. So I just started as a research assistant for the university where I did my undergrad degree. And then, I moved forward and started having experience working with universities from Australia, the UK, and the United States.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Simisola Smith. I would say I started my journey in international student recruitment whilst being an international student myself. Studied at King's College London, where I was a student ambassador and did quite a little bit of work with the then international officer and loved it. Loved it enough for me to drop out. Instead of going to medical school, I continued in this career. So it's 12 years plus. I've worked with a range of institutions, mainly UK institutions, Lancaster University, King's College London, the University of Sunderland. The last 5 years before I joined Grok, I was with Global University Systems, where I moved from UK recruitment to European recruitment, recruiting students to our German campuses, French campuses, and our Greece campus. Now I'm with Grok. I've been with Grok since May this year. It's exciting, apart from the fact that I was once an international student, also an in-country rep at some point, after I moved back to Lagos, Nigeria, where I am currently now. It's been an interesting ride.
Well, thank you so much. And we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise in this room right now, in our virtual room. And with that expertise come many stories about the deep impact the work you're doing has on students. So I'm excited to hear those stories today. But before we dive in, just a bit of housekeeping. I noticed that there are people in the room from all over the world, and I want to welcome you all. We've got Belfast in the room, London, Sheffield, Malaysia, we've got Pakistan, New York City. We've got folks from across the world here, and I know that many will be logging in after the fact and watching this on the recording, depending on where they're coming from. Welcome Leeds, who's just joining the chat. So I encourage you all who are here with us today to join in on our conversation and pop your comments into the chat. And if you have questions for our expert panelists, please add them in the Q&A section. You'll see all the icons on the right-hand side of your screen. So just noting that. You'll see polls as well. We popped in a couple of polls to sort of get our chat going this morning. So if you haven't answered them already, please do. And the first poll is, of these three regions that we're talking about, what region do you primarily focus on for your student recruitment? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer those polls. We'll come back to them. There's a second poll underneath them, which is, what's the biggest challenge you face in student recruitment? So please go ahead and pop in your answers. Okay, I see those poll numbers going up. So thank you so much. So poll, comments in the chat, and questions in the Q&A section. But first, I'm going to dive in with a question for all of you. And I'm wondering, talk to me about the value of a foreign institution having in-country representation in your region. And this is a two-parter. How does it look different now than it did pre-COVID?
So from an institution perspective, I would say, so we do have Grok representatives in country staff in 3 different countries right now, of course, in China, India, and Vietnam. And we have worked on short-term projects in those emerging markets with Middle East and in Latin America. So I have worked closely with Islam and Maria, and it has been invaluable with all of the in-country representatives beyond anything that I could have imagined in a variety of capacities. So really, as we see the competition for international students really starting to increase as well, and as universities, especially in the United States, hit a domestic enrollment cliff, that competition for international students is really, really increasing. So the support that I can provide from Cincinnati itself is not the same that an in-country representative can provide on a variety of levels, from talking with the students in a language and cultural similarity, but talking with the families, representing us at fairs where we would not be able to be, making those high school connections, and really supporting our stakeholders at a higher, much higher level. So I know that we have had many partnerships within Latin America over the years, and not until we had an in-country representative in Latin America, in Colombia with Maria, were we really able to see that really take a next level to expand and to succeed, because it wasn't just a component that, Maria was able to speak Spanish. We have many Spanish speakers here at the University of Cincinnati. It was really the excitement that our partners saw that we were invested in supporting Latin American students. So it's really different from every level as well. In the Middle East, we were really not as strong with our agent partnerships, and Islam was really able to work with us to really strategize, to find what strengths, what our enrollment targets were for the Middle East, and find partners that would lead us to success in our enrollment targets and really facilitate those relationships and then continue to expand. So we signed 6 new agents within the Middle East in 6 different countries because of our in-country representation in the Middle East. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to work as much in Sub-Saharan Africa with Simisola, but I'm sure Simisola will be able to provide a lot more insight into that region as well.
Hannah, thanks so much for sharing what that looks like from the institution side. Let's flip the script now and hear what it looks like from your side. Islam.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So just to build on what Hannah said, so right now, in-country representation has never been more critical than it is right now, because of the competition, because of the expectations from all of the stakeholders when it comes to high school counselors, students and parents, and even counselors at educational agents partners. So when you look at it, a country representative will actually make a huge difference in the sense of building and maintaining these kinds of relationship, in showing the commitment the institution has to that region, as Hannah rightly mentioned, to showcase that we are here not just by being present. It's just beyond being present. It's actually more about having that cultural sensitivity, having that kind of basically rapport with with all of the stakeholders. And I can tell you from personal experience, I can't count the times of how many times I've had parents come to me and say, well, as a Muslim, how will my daughter fare at this university? Right? And this is just such an important point, because they know I would understand their concerns, right? They would know I would be able to connect to them and advise them in a way that would be suitable to them. Now, when it comes to the pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-COVID, it was kind of like a valuable addition, post-COVID, it is a necessity because of how competitive the landscape has become. So that I would say about when it comes to the MENA region.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. In my case, I couldn't agree more with both of you. In Latin America, relationships are extremely important. We're kind of like built up on that. For that can be the difference between you succeeding in a region and not succeeding in a country here in Latin America. So building up those relationships is really key to have success in the market. I completely agree with Islam, in terms of like, I have also had parents telling me, as a woman and as someone that was also an international student, they ask me about my personal experience as a Latin American student studying abroad. And for them, those insights are extremely valuable. That can be the difference of them feeling safe of sending their kid abroad. Because remember, like in my case, for instance, when I was working with Hannah and currently the other universities I'm working for, many of them, I'm working with kids that are under 18 years old. They're just 17. And, when they go and study abroad, they might be 18, which might sound that they're adults, but they're not. They come from a very comfort environment, and for them, a really huge decision. And that is something that I can relate, and that culturally I can also understand. And I would say also the other thing, like pre-COVID, I completely agree with Islam. I don't think the competition was so fierce. I have been in events where I see so many universities now of people coming from everywhere, coming from the UK, coming from Australia, that are really looking for those Latin Americans. And something that I didn't see that much before COVID.
Rosario, you're cutting out just a little bit here.
But now that the area, I see many cities, they don't care about care. They value a lot in Latin American institutions. There's not only international students pay a fee. It's actually the value of so that academic knowledge that you have. I would say besides the competition as well. So
Rosario, you're just cutting out a little bit here.
Are you hearing me well?
You're cutting out a little bit here, but what I'm hearing is that I'm hearing that the linguistic factor matters, that the cultural factor matters, and that relationships matter. Those are the big pieces that I'm taking away. And to that end, Simisola, I see that you have, there's relationships in the chat. You have a friend in the chat from Keele University here who says a big hello to you, and wondering if you can share some of your experiences around this and talk to us about the value of the institution having the in-country representation. Clearly relationships matter, and we're seeing that right here in the chat.
Hi, Gracie from Keele. Yes, perfect. So I think with Sub-Saharan Africa, culture, with what the other panelists have said, and navigating tradition is very important. Well, also in addition to what we see with digital technology, Africa is a region where relationships are really important. So emails are all well and good, but one-to-one relationships and one-to-one interactions are very, very key. I moved from London to Lagos a couple of years ago to be an in-country rep. You wouldn't have seen that happen in that sort of situation, because a lot of international students actually do that vice versa. So they travel abroad and want to stay within that country or, navigate and not come back to Africa. But I found out that even though I made that decision, and there were a bit of questions around, why are you leaving London? Why do you want to come back to Lagos? Now I am happy that I made a really good decision. Not only have I built a network of, of agents, school communities, but just even building your personal brand. As institutions pick in-country reps, they're not just picking a rep to represent their brands, they're also picking an individual who would definitely fight their cause. So the passion the person has, knowing the culture, knowing that tradition, it's so simple as a parent just knowing you're African. They get very, very excited when they're speaking to you. Like Islam said, they ask you intricate questions. The fact that you probably studied abroad is an added advantage. So they let you, you can explain how you navigated life as a teenager. Are they safe? Which countries are safe? Amongst other things. So the advantage and even the use of communication. I know that, overseas, Hannah rightly said, there's a limit to what she can do in Cincinnati, right? But locally here, the use of WhatsApp, as simple as that, communicating with a counselor, that one-to-one interaction. I would not say that Sub-Saharan Africa, there are limits to boundaries. So it's not disrespectful for someone to message you out of hours. So I see more and more colleagues put in, my office times at 9 to 5 p.m. on their business WhatsApp just to build, because people tend to get so close that you almost become like a family. Because in Africa, culture is important. Traditions are really, really, really key. So I found that, in-country representation cannot be overemphasized. With how it has been pre-COVID and post-COVID, I would say, especially Nigeria, the idea of in-country representation has always existed. It has existed for many, many years, especially for UK institutions. So they've picked up on that trend, and now we're seeing more and more countries adapt, right? So like the US, like Canada, like Australia, building on, East African regions and so on and so forth. So pre-COVID, it always existed, very strong in-country representation, especially for UK reps. Now we're seeing that transit with more and more competitor destinations looking into the same model.
Thank you so much, Simisola. I appreciate that. And I noticed in the chat some comments, and people are agreeing with you here and thanking you, and also wanting to connect with you, Rosario. So to that end, if you'd like to connect with any of our experts in the chat, maybe they can either add their emails to the chat, but you can certainly click on that green banner below, and you can connect with Grok Global Services there, certainly. So go ahead and do that. And if you want to pop your emails in the chat, fantastic. Now, you all are so well versed in this topic that you've already gone ahead and answered my next question, which was about that cultural competence piece and the cultural factors and how to navigate that. But to dig in a little bit deeper, I want to ask you, how many countries can typically be covered with a single representative in your region? For example, I'm curious about a Colombian or a Mexican representative covering Brazil, or Jordanian or Egyptian representative also covering Morocco or Qatar. So can you talk to me a little bit about that? What does that look like?
So
yes, sure. Sorry, Simisola, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, I think with the Sub-Saharan region, historically, institutions have always usually had someone based out in Nigeria, because Nigeria is the international hub for international student recruitment in terms of size, in terms of migration. But it also depends on the institution's brand as well, right? So I would say it's very brand specific and where the institution is located. So take, for example, Australian institutions might not follow the usual recommendations where UK, Canada, US, would first start with Nigeria. Australia, we see trends stronger in East Africa, where more numbers are coming from the likes of Kenya, tapping into the other East African regions like Mauritius, and then navigating through the rest of the Sub-Saharan. So that's that. Then with the uniqueness of the Sub-Saharan, we have French-speaking parts of the Sub-Saharan. We see Canadian institutions who offer French-speaking programs, how they deliver those programs, the reps that, that look after them in the market. We are seeing the rise of reps in, Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, in Cameroon, so as to sell those programs as well. But the important thing to note is both English and French are very important when institutions are looking to recruit reps. The changes in policies, I think this would be very interesting for Canadian institutions, with the rise of, or the interest at which Canada is looking to zone into French-speaking Africa with a new scheme that encourages international students who are not thinking of going to Quebec, for instance, and all that navigation. So it's very brand specific. Of course, if you start from Nigeria, it depends on budgets as well. We do have institutions who have more than one rep. But if it's like brand specific and budget wise, you might want to first start with the hub, then grow, right? Depends on the numbers. It depends on where your conversions are happening. Also, visa approvals. Some institutions might do well in Ghana because Ghana has a really, really high visa approval, depending on the country. For Canada, US, for instance. So you might get high numbers from Nigeria, but you might get better conversions in other countries. So it's a case-by-case basis, and it depends on a number of factors.
Thank you so much. And I see, looking at our polls, that a lot of folks are, 33% in fact, are saying that 3% are saying that language barriers are indeed a factor, and cultural, another 10% saying cultural differences are a factor. So I think this really speaks to your point. Other thoughts?
In my case, I guess our regions are not so different. Of course, each country is very different. Central America can be seen as a completely different region than South America. But having said that, specifically to reply to your question, Maureen, I don't see any issues with, for instance, someone from Colombia or from Mexico recruiting in Brazil. I know many people, ask themselves, oh, but they don't speak Portuguese. Like, if you don't speak Portuguese, they don't speak Portuguese. How can they recruit in Brazil? We are still very knowledgeable of the, about Brazil, and also many people in Brazil speak Spanish. I have had the experiences of many Portuguese friends that actually in some instances they prefer to speak to me in Spanish rather than English. Spanish is a language that is taught at from a young age in Brazilian institutions, so that is absolutely not an issue. Not an issue at all. And the good thing about having, I'm a huge advocate for having someone in Colombia, because we are, a hub for many airports. We are a hub for many flights, international flights. We are very central in terms of being able to recruit in many areas of South America and Central America as well. So I don't see an issue with that at all.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I can say, from the MENA perspective, just to add on to what Maria and Simi said, it is quite similar, and it's always depends on the institution. So the institution, what their needs, what are their goals, right? Because MENA is such this massive, basically a group of countries with diversity and different needs, but it also depends on what the university is looking for. So depending, does this university already have a presence in the region or not? Right? And if they do have a presence, is their presence more concentrated within the Gulf region, or is it within the Levant region, or within the North Africa region, right? And then we need to look at, usually people would always think about, when they think about the region, they would think about the Middle East only. But then if you are just focusing on the Middle East, then you are forgetting about other very important parts of the region, which can be very crucial when it comes to diversity and to attracting basically, or working on untapped markets. So it is institution based, and I think we need to, and I think this is one of the things that Grok really excels at, because we have this customized approach whenever we're working with an institution, to understand their needs first, see where they are already, what they are already doing in the region, and then build on it later on and providing the advice accordingly. So, and I think that is another point that leads to where to deploy, if I may add. It's basically, you look at it from a different perspective. Okay, so universities usually go to the UAE because it's the hub in the region, right? But that comes with its own different complications. So first of all, we need to look at, or with the caveat of UAE, we need to look at the diversity. What kind of diversity will the UAE bring to your table? Because as we know, and most of the activities are actually concentrated within Dubai, over 90% of the international student population coming from Dubai is actually of South Asian descent, mostly from India. And while that's okay, that's amazing, you're bringing undergraduate students, which is sometimes you're not getting out of India itself. However, how does that impact your diversity, which is one of your main goals, right? So then you start looking at other countries within the region, which is you need to look at if that person is going to be culturally aware, culturally fluent, right? Region fluent to be able to work within the whole region. So that's when we look at, for example, Jordan and Egypt. Another point when it comes to the UAE is how competitive it is. So there's a lot of competition there. It is becoming an oversaturated market.
Yeah.
So that requires a new way of looking and dealing with that market. It requires innovation. It requires looking at perhaps like looking outside of Dubai, looking at tier 2 cities within the UAE itself. So while the UAE is an amazing hub, I always encourage institutions to look outside of the UAE depending on their goals for the region. So if you're looking for more diversity, if you're looking to attract more Arab students, then I would always recommend Jordan and Egypt, because you have these culturally fluent individuals there who can basically work with the whole region from North Africa to the Middle East. So
thanks so much, Islam. Yeah, thank you. And of the regions that are represented on this call, they're fairly well split. Looking at the poll numbers of the respondents, Sub-Saharan Africa and MENA region are tied at 36.67% of the region primarily focused on for student recruitment, with Latin America coming in at 26.67%. So a lot of representation across the board here, fairly evenly split. I want to stay with you and Simisola for a moment here, if I may, Islam, and ask, is there a point at which a single representative is stretched too thin across too many countries? Simisola.
Very good question. It could happen. I mean, it's happened to me. And that is also a good thing. It means that it's growth. It means that the institution is doing something right. So I'll take, for instance, my own personal example as an in-country rep. Of course, the aim was to build the brand within the key destinations, but we also found out that the biggest destination wasn't giving us the conversions we required. So therefore, we had to think outside the box, right? What this meant was, tapping into, for that particular institution, we're going into French-speaking Africa because we had a French, campus, tapping into the East Africa because they had more appointments for the German embassy, for instance, and the visa approvals were better. So as we're growing in size and growing in numbers, it then meant that the institution needed to rethink their strategies. Now, the question is, most institutions might ask, okay, can we just start since we know maybe the end from the beginning? You can't predict it. You cannot predict it. So if you are thinking of starting, unless you already know, and maybe a model of you've had colleagues who have been tapping into the market little by little, and you're seeing growth prospects, yeah, you might decide to go head on to build a whole team of in-country representatives. But then the data would begin to tell you if this is the case. If it's an unfairly tapped market, you might want to start small, then grow. But there are instances where one rep isn't enough. And through the numbers you're getting, through the revenues you're getting, you would definitely know and rethink that strategy to tap into the markets that require more of you zoning into.
Thank you so much, Simisola. And Matthew Anderson agrees with you in the chat. He says, agrees, French-speaking students are largely untapped in the UK, hence their formation. So thanks so much, and thank you for your comments. And just another reminder that if you have comments, please add them to the chat. Questions, please put in our Q&A. We will get to as many as we possibly can at the end. Islam, what does it look like? What's your take on that as far as being stretched too thin? Can that happen, and how?
So I would say this is a good problem to have if you get stretched too thin. But again, it depends on the institution itself. And I've had the privilege of working with institutions who basically had to focus on certain countries, whereas others who would basically wanted to kind of like cover the whole region. So I've had the personal experience of doing both. Now it depends on basically, again, are you a grower in the region or are you a builder, right? So if you are a grower in the region, you already have your priority markets, right? Those are the markets that you need to focus, like I would say like 60% of your time, but you don't want to, it's not feasible just for the in-country rep to focus on these markets. You also want to build your other markets, right? So that's basically of how to strategize and to divide their time and to prioritize and to know where to go from there. And that, again, that's the importance of having local expertise. That's what helps in guiding these kinds of initiatives. And then when you look at it from a builder institution, an institution that hasn't done a lot in the region, okay, so we can't look at it from, okay, those are the good markets and those are the not so good markets, because you never know what's gonna work for that particular institution, because it could be a market within North Africa that is not doing well for, let's say, UK universities, for example. It could be a Canadian institution, and North Africa, like for Canada, is blowing up right now, right? So it could be that market is going to be your primary market, right? So it is different, but it is a good problem to have. It could be at the beginning that you have one representative that is able to cover the whole region, okay, doing activities there. But then as numbers grows, as priorities shift, then you need to look at perhaps adding more. And it could be that, the region would only be able to provide you what is enough just for one person to cover. So it's a process. And again, that's why having this local expertise can be incredibly helpful, because that can help you guide in building your strategy moving forward.
Thanks so much. And I know that you don't have crystal balls, but wondering how you make those data-driven decisions based on the information that you do have. Although I will ask you to take out your crystal balls at the end, and my last question when I ask you about projections for the future. But to stay with that idea of using best resources, and where are you allocating these in-country representatives? I want to know, what countries or cities are the most popular bases for in-country representatives in your region, and why? And also, are you seeing more diversity in locations of in-country representatives in your particular region? And Rosario, if I can start with you on that, tell me about LATAM. What does it look like there?
Yes. So I would say the three countries that people tend to have a lot of in-country representatives are Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, just because those are the three main source markets for students going abroad. But I will talk more about that afterwards, and why universities tend to focus on those markets. But every time I have traveled, I do have to say I do see a lot of Colombian representatives, way more than Brazilian or Mexican representatives. I think that there are many reasons why that can happen. I guess, for instance, I think one of the reasons is our labor laws in Colombia. We have been growing as well on a lot of foreign companies coming and hiring Colombians abroad, which has made those regulations a little bit more, practical and a little bit more known for foreign companies. So that, of course, also gave us as someone in our country a lot of stability, which is something a lot of people from LATAM are looking for. One of the things, we really like is knowing that we have an indefinite contract. And that's something that Colombia has regulated very well. And also, not to brag about my Colombians, but we have a great talent pool as well. And the reason for that is also because, again, we are one of the countries that go and study abroad the most. So many of us, is in my case, I went and studied in Australia and lived in Australia for about 5 years. And then I came back to Bogota. So you have a lot of people like that with that sort of expertise. And that's why Colombia has become a hub for many in-country representations. And that's really what you see when you're traveling to some other countries in Latin America. You see a lot of Colombian representatives.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that shout out, and go ahead and brag. These are great stories, and I'm so enjoying hearing these individual student stories, and really at the end of the day how this impacts an institution and how it impacts students. So Simisola, talk to me about what this looks like, and the diversity pieces in the most popular countries in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Absolutely. I think very similar to Maria in terms of how this is tiered and structured. Historically, in-country reps have always existed in Lagos, particularly Nigeria. And the reason is very evident because most of that migration happens from Nigeria in terms of the student populations that actually move to key study destinations. But just slightly different from Maria's case is the in-country representatives, some of them don't necessarily have an international background. They're quite diverse. A number of them have worked with agents and have a good ownership of most study destinations. So you'd find a number of in-country reps from different backgrounds. The talent pool is enormous, which means that the competition for roles within Nigeria are quite huge, right? So this industry has grown quite substantially over the last couple of years. In fact, it's a whole industry. I think in the past, it just used to be seen as, oh, this is like a counseling unit or sub-unit of some sort of A-level school or something, but now it's grown and we're seeing more and more roles, being advertised in Nigeria. A number of institutions that benefit from in-country representation have usually always been the UK, US, and Canada, but we're seeing the trend shifting, particularly, for UK, for instance, representation in Ghana is becoming quite interesting. Why? Because, Ghana is next in line to Nigeria for the Sub-Saharan. The same thing as well for US and Canada. It's being tagged as the next country after Nigeria in the Sub-Saharan. Because Ghana in itself has a robust economy, but even more so quite stable in comparison to Nigeria, right? So the embassies, the visa processes, they're seen to be a less risky market when you put them next to Nigeria, for example. But for countries like Australia, for instance, they tend to historically have reps in Kenya. And I think this is the case because Kenya is in fact the hub for East Africa and South Africa. So when, an in-country rep is tapping the market in Nairobi, for instance, they're also simultaneously tapping other markets in East Africa, like Ethiopia, like Mauritius. They're also looking into the Southern African parts of the continent, including South Africa and Zimbabwe. So these trends tend to mix. Of course, we keep talking about, the key recruitment destinations, but even more importantly, there are emerging markets that are now looking into in-country representation. There's a huge conversation around France as a study destination. There's a huge conversation around Germany as a study destination and how these destinations are also tapping into the market share of the Sub-Saharan. And we're seeing the rise of in-country reps in French-speaking Africa. So reps being based in Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, with huge numbers, coming from Cote d'Ivoire, coming from Cameroon, coming from Senegal, coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo as well. So these are markets that are, poised to be like the next best thing in the Sub-Saharan. It will be interesting to see how these trends manifest over the next couple of months and how institutions are beginning to re-strategize. I mean, we had a colleague on the chat who mentioned French-speaking Africa. It's largely untapped, but the question is, what institutions will benefit from the market? This is also dependent on the sort of policies that each study destination has, because students will mainly migrate to destinations that favor them. This is something that we have to keep in mind. Return on investment is huge for the Sub-Saharan region, I guess with all other regions. But over the next couple of months, we'll see how this trends and how universities begin to focus their reps in each state or in each region.
Thank you so much, Simi, and I appreciate hearing about these trends. In fact, before this call, I was chatting with a colleague about emerging markets, and in particular, Germany was mentioned, and France as well. So thanks for pulling those in as well. I want to hear what it looks like in Mina and your thoughts on this, Islam, and then I want to hear what it looks like from the university side. And Hannah, how do you make decisions? How does an institution make decisions? And what do you need to think about when it comes to deciding where to deploy? So Islam and then Hannah.
Sure. So in MENA, the main hub is the UAE. That's basically where the majority of in-country reps are based. And it makes sense because of how central it is and how connected it is to the rest of the region. And then you have Jordan and Egypt, and Jordan, just like Colombia, it is, while it's a small country, again, don't want to brag, but it has a massive, an incredible talent pool that basically is, again, whether it's for Jordan or Egypt, they are culturally adaptive and fluent, and they can basically work with the whole region from their bases whether in Egypt or in Jordan. The advantage of having someone outside of the UAE is it's basically, if you're looking for someone who's Arabic speaker, if you want someone who is an Arabic speaker, your chances of finding someone is higher when you're looking at whether Jordan or Egypt. Whereas in the UAE, there is a high probability of having more people who would be, again, from an expat population, would not necessarily be able to speak Arabic. Now, you might ask me, well, is Arabic a really good, is it necessarily needed for these kinds of roles? While the types of students you're working for, generally speaking, are usually very English fluent, and you can easily communicate with them. However, if you want to speak with certain types of sponsors, certain types of when you're speaking with parents, or certain types of students, especially the post-grad who did not study abroad, then you might need Arabic to be able to communicate with them. So it is not a necessity, it's more of an added advantage of having that. But again, it always depends on what are your goals when you're having someone based in country, okay? But as both Simi and Maria mentioned before, it's basically you have your hub, and then you have the hub that becomes oversaturated over time. Then you would look at other destinations, other basically countries within the region that could be very useful for you. Saudi is becoming more and more popular now, especially after it became more open, and you see people wanting to be based in Saudi to have access to the various sponsors and to the various types of students, because the kingdom is massive, right? And then there are some interest in having people based in North Africa in particular, okay? Because again, they would be more aware of that particular region in itself. But generally speaking, having someone within the UAE, the top three, UAE, Jordan, and Egypt, will they be able to cover the whole region? Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. Thanks, Islam. Now from the university side, how do you go about making those decisions? You have a set amount of funding. Where do you go, Hannah, and what goes into that decision making?
Yeah, it's always the funding from the university side, because of course, we are all advocates for wanting to be in as many places as we can to increase the diversity from all over the world on our campuses, but we do not have the funding for that necessarily to expand within every country around the world. So it was a lot of internal analysis on demonstrating to our leadership where we're seeing success from certain countries, where we're seeing applications conversions, and where we're seeing, again, those visas, of course, based on country. And then deeper analysis after we have demonstrated, where our success might look short-term and long-term within those countries. Working again with Grok was really instrumental in really helping us to identify where those strengths would lie within country representation. And as mentioned before, really being adaptable and innovative. So finding that hub, but then really, deciding we want to focus on, Marie has already mentioned in Latin America specifically, we wanted to focus on, primarily Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Peru. We couldn't travel, even with an in-country representation, we couldn't afford, or literally could not be in the same place for key recruitment times or key yield times. So it's definitely about making priorities based on those strategic analysis, and working closely with Grok, with leadership, and those in-country representatives to see where that strategy can start or build upon and continue to grow and to innovate as the trends change throughout the years.
Thanks so much for that. Really appreciate that. And I see my friend Jose is in the chat and has asked a question about this exact piece about the funding from the university side, as I know he is from the university side. So I hope that answers your question, Jose. And if not, you can always feel free to reach out. And I encourage anyone to click on that green call to action button down at the bottom of your screen to continue this conversation after we are done, because I'm watching the time and I've got so many more questions, and I know that there are questions coming into the chat as well, which I will get to. But I want to talk about cultural norms again for a bit. And I know we touched about this at the beginning of our conversation, but what cultural norms typically surprise foreign institutions when they deploy in-country staff in the region? And Hannah, if I can stay with you for a minute on the institutional perspective, you talked about the decisions being made around the funding pieces, but any surprises that you've had along the way around cultural norms that you can share?
Well, as Islam kind of already mentioned, a lot of universities are focusing on UAE for their Middle East recruitment, but it is in Dubai largely Southeast Asian populations. So something that a lot of universities, I think, are already a little bit more familiar with in dealing with that type of culture, rather than expanding to the diversity of more of Arabic students. So really getting Islam's insight was invaluable, because there's so much research I can do on my own, but really just questions that I wouldn't have even thought to ask. Islam was able to provide that insight for us. And we've mentioned before, I didn't know that the working week was actually even different than here in the United States, and just trying to respect around different holidays as well. So while our school schedule in India recruitment was critical at a certain time for our programs, for our deadlines, unfortunately, that also came around Ramadan, which meant that we were trying to navigate around those really difficult, timelines during a very important holiday within the Middle East. So while I might not know everything, I would say that's why we have in-country representation, to really help guide us and facilitate those conversations about things that we may not even know to ask. They will be able to really provide that key insight and say, hey, you can't do this, or hey, it would work better this way because of this the way that this works within the country or within the culture.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Rosario, any thoughts from the LATAM region?
I think something, I have heard that a lot of colleagues express, because for me, it's really not something that surprising, when I run into those things, because of course I'm from this region. But something I have heard, other colleagues, university representatives that come and recruit in LATAM, that they are from the US or Australia or Canada, is how involved parents are. And sometimes they struggle a little bit with that. They might not speak Spanish, so they don't know really how to communicate with the parents. I have just the recent example of a colleague that was was talking to a parent, and she kind of understood the word conservative, and for us conservative means one thing and in English means another thing. So it is just like those small things, and there was a little bit of miscommunication because the parent understood a whole completely different thing. So just like that knowledge and that capacity of being able to, have that understanding with the parents is something that an in-country representative can really, add to. We are, like Latin American students are really independent, but at the same time, at the end of the day, parents are the ones that are making the financial investment. So they are the ones that are making the decision at the end. So they are they play a key role in those recruitment numbers. So I think that's where it differs. I know, for instance, in the United States, students are completely independent on the decisions, because they, take on student loans, for instance, or bank loans to be able to study. Here in Latin America, we depend solely on our parents. It's really rare that a student takes up on a loan to go and study abroad, especially if you're an undergraduate student. If you're a postgraduate, then we have Col Futuro, which can help you out. But still, like, even as an adult, your parents and your family as a whole are going to be able to, have still a little bit of decision power in the final decision that you make as a student. So I think that's something that, some representatives from that come from the US or Australia or Canada have struggled with, and that has like really surprised them.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pull in some of the questions from the audience into this next question for you, because I know I'm always keen to learn about best practices and innovative initiatives that are going on that institutions are using in their management or employee engagement strategies of in-country representatives. So can you speak to us, either Hannah, about what your thoughts about your institution, some innovative and unique ideas around that, and then from the representative, what that looks like in your region? Best practices.
Sure. So I would just say communication and collaboration, it's really a team effort to do what we are all trying to accomplish, which is to support international student mobility and education abroad. And so while from the institution perspective, we are going to provide our historical trends as much as we can, this is what we've seen throughout the past 3 years, especially post-COVID, where we've seen our success coming from, looking at those trends, analyzing where we can see that success. So looking at a recruitment strategy together that is realistic, and then collaborating on, simple things, but really critical things. So in Colombia, working a lot with Maria on, whether or not when we should travel versus the calendar A versus calendar B in Colombia, which is something that I had not even considered in our previous recruitment strategy. So really collaboration and communication is key. I meet weekly or bi-weekly with all of my in-country representatives to kind of keep that line of communication open and really providing as full staff members. So, everything, full access to our Slate CRM systems, all access to our shared drive files, business cards, anything that they need, we can either send to our in-country staff because we want to set them up for success. So sending them, swag, brochures, whether, discussions on whether or not material should be translated, and then visiting. I have visited Islam, I have visited Maria, I have visited our staff in India, and I'm going to Vietnam next week to visit our in-country representative there. And as much as possible, bringing in-country representatives to our campus directly. So to really say, I've been there. I can tell you, this is the campus. This may be the dorm that you'd be living. Yes, I felt safe. This is how beautiful you'll get to take advantage of. Because that was a lot of questions. I think it's funny because, Cincinnati's not a big city. It's not Los Angeles. It's not New York. So a lot of times in Latin America, Maria, I think got this question too, is like, where is Cincinnati? Is that near New York? And so really helping to give a full perspective of what life would be like here as well. So I know Islam and Maria and Simisola will have other advice, but that's really the component, is being as involved as possible and taking advantage of open communication as frequently as possible. It's a best practice that I would recommend.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I'm mindful of the time, and we're coming up on the hour. So I'm going to ask if there are just a few best practices that come top of mind for you. Simisola?
Just to add on to what Hannah said, it's very important in Sub-Saharan region. I know that independent contractor relationships have usually been built for in-country reps, but more and more reps are looking into more structured employment. And this is, I think, very key. I was an independent contractor before I joined Grok, so I can speak, at both ends. I'd always been an independent contractor when I moved back to Lagos. And the system I see with what Grok has to offer in terms of the employment structure, things that, overseas might not be seen as important or would just be considered as normal independent contractors don't really think about pension schemes, don't necessarily think about health insurance or taxes. These are the things that come under a structured employment, and what, institutions are offering the in-country reps, if they're, in the sub-Saharan region, that you're not just someone we threw there, you're part of us, you're part of this team. And also, more and more importantly, currency is becoming very important. So reps in the sub-Saharan do want to get paid in dollars, in foreign exchange, due to the devaluation of the naira, the cedis, whatever, it's in their local country. So these are things that, institutions might not necessarily be thinking about and just assume that, oh, it should be normal, right? So these are things that institutions could factor in. As simple as that, this is what makes a difference between, oh, we have an in-country rep and we have a member of our team in Lagos or anywhere in the world.
Thank you so much. Islam, a best
Yeah,
practice we've seen.
Yeah, and just to add on something, and I know it might sound obvious, but to actually listen to your own country staff, you have them in the country for a reason, right? So in terms of, again, like when to travel to the region. So again, as Hannah rightly mentioned, Ramadan, it's such an important time in the region, and many people don't even, like, it doesn't register to them because it changes every year. So like, what we can do at that time and what we cannot do at that time, and to be more sensitive to your employees' needs during that time. And I think, again, that's an important piece to be aware of. And another thing is basically just to kind of keep in mind, for example, and it's unique to my region, but the perspective is always like, this region is like predominantly Muslim, but not all Arabs are Muslim. So to be able to kind of, again, understand the student audience that you, or even the employee that you're working with, understanding their needs, understanding basically where they're coming from and what they need during that time to support them. The other point is, again, just to build on what Simi said, it's ensuring that this person feels as a part of the team, as a team member. Hannah, again, I can say this for Hannah, she did an amazing job in ensuring that she meets like with me on a regular time to ensure that, we're on the same page whenever we're strategizing for next steps. And this is such an important piece, because the in-country rep can feel to a certain point that they are disconnected. They are working remotely. Sometimes they don't even have any team members. And again, that's part of what Simi said, is ensuring that you are part of a community, ensuring part of a team. And again, this is one of the things that Grok does an amazing job at, in ensuring that we make sure that our staff in country are a part of the bigger team, that they don't feel disconnected, that they are getting whatever support that they need from local team members, from the local management team, to ensure that they are getting all of that support.
Islam, thank you so much. And sort of going off of that question, Thomas wants to know, what would you say is the best employment model for in-country reps? I don't know who would like to jump in and answer this.
I'm happy to. It is through these kinds of three kinds of models, okay? Because I didn't get a chance to introduce Grok at the beginning. We are a professional services firm, and part of what we do is we offer services to institutions to help them in building their international recruitment strategy and international engagement. And part of the services that we do is in-country staffing, digital marketing, and advising. But the main core of our business is ensuring that we provide the in-country service staffing to universities, and we do this through a structured model, ensuring that, again, that the in-country staff is getting support from local management team and is basically being set up as in a legal and a safe environment to ensure that they are doing the best of their business. And again, I put in my email in the comments section, so anyone who wants to know more, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to assist.
Thank you for doing that. And then another sort of offshoot question of that, and this comes from Stephanie, is how are in-country reps paid? And what are the expectations for the ROI?
So income, again, it varies. So it depends on the experience of the in-country rep. It depends on what the institution is looking for, the amount of years. It depends on in order to get an amount, you have to do a benchmarking, and that will vary. That can be covered in this sort of webinar. For instance, the Sub-Saharan region, the most important thing, I guess all across all our regions actually are Grok. All our reps are employed through a very compliant scheme. Compliance, regional policies are covered, employee laws are covered. And I think this is the most important thing when it comes to recruiting in-country reps. Not only does it support the in-country rep or covers them, it also covers the institution. They are following due diligence protocol, which means that everyone is accountable. Accountability is important. No one sort of escapes or has issues, and it also reduces high staff turnover. We find that some institutions get independent contractors. You don't know where they're coming from. No one is vetting the system. Some of the institutions have recruiters reps just through one-to-one Skype calls, for instance, and no one is physically meeting the individual to assess them. Do you understand? So these protocols are important, and it safeguards not only the rep, but the institution in the long run.
Thank you so much, Simi. And I noticed that you have also put your email into the chat. I appreciate you doing that. So please feel free to grab those before we close. I have one last question for each of you. But again, grab those emails before the session ends, or also click on that green banner below to learn more about Grok Global Services and how they can assist your institution. My last question, as promised, is the crystal ball question, and it will be in the form of a lightning round because we have just 1 minute left. So outlook for your region for 2025 recruitment for the Big Four English-speaking destination markets. So lightning round, I'm going to start with you, Rosario.
Okay, so I will have to say that each country is completely different. It's completely different to recruit for a US institution or a UK institution or a Canadian institution. But even though I'm a huge believer in our, already developed markets, which are, Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, and, I'm a huge advocate for them, please make sure that you are analyzing your institution, analyzing the cost of your tuition fee. Where are you located? If you're a private or a public university, and depending on that, you can analyze, and that's why like the knowledge of an in-country representatives, it's extremely valuable, because we can let okay, according to the profile of your university, I would actually advise you to look at an emerging market, which to me will be countries like Ecuador, Argentina, Peru, Costa Rica. Those are Panama. Those are countries that many representatives from abroad come and recruit to, because they are not so well known, or because statistically they don't see that many students going abroad. But those are emerging markets, and if you are new to the Latin American market, maybe those emerging countries is where you're going to see really those conversion rates, because at the end of the day, you can have thousands of applications, but are those students really enrolling in your institution? So that's where I think you should focus. Study the profile of your university and see if you should be recruiting in a developing market or emerging markets. As I said, there are some wonderful countries in Latin America. I'm really surprised with the potential that countries like Ecuador and Argentina have.
Great, thank you so much. And in 30 seconds or less, Islam, your predictions for 2025.
Well, price sensitivity on the rise. Sponsor market will remain volatile in the MENA region, and you'll see that, but student mobility will remain and will grow. There is a shift towards non-traditional destinations, but that does not discount any of the potential for the Big Four, basically.
Thank you so much. Simi.
Due to the sort of the youth population of the Sub-Saharan region, international student recruitment will continue to grow. In terms of how they will be spread across the Big Four, I think that is a key thing to note. Historically, it's been the UK, but now with the change in policies, interests are beginning to come from Canada and, of course, Australia, with policies that are interesting and are positive. So it'll be interesting to see how 2025 goes, but the truth is international student recruitment will continue to grow in Sub-Saharan region, basically because also of the economy, the devaluation of the currencies. Young people are looking to better themselves, to grow. So this is a market to watch expand and continue to thrive regardless of the policies, regardless of situations. But institutions should please note that scholarships, as Islam said, will be important. Tuition fee, flexibility in payment plans across the board, and are things that they should put in mind when coming to recruit students from the Sub-Saharan region. But all in all, it's positive on the outlook.
Thank you so much. And speaking of institutions, Hannah, you get the last word today. Predictions for student recruitment in 2025 from the university perspective.
Well, I fully agree with everyone. It's really just an analysis, and it depends on each university where they can meet at price point, what scholarships, what programs they have available for, both at the undergrad and graduate level. So we've seen a shift at our university switching more to graduate international STEM programs for 1-year programs rather than 2-year programs. So really just taking that analysis, understanding price points, different markets, how they should be treated differently based on a lot of different factors, and really just listening to in-country staff representatives for all of their incredible advice.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for offering your incredible advice, your personal experiences, your insights today with us. Things that really stuck out to me are the fact that relationships matter, intercultural competence matters, listening, visiting, collaborating and communicating, and trend spotting and making data-driven decisions. So thank you all so much for sharing. I'm lucky to have all of your email addresses so that I can continue the conversation with you. I noticed that you've also shared them in the chat so that our audience can do so as well. And if you want to get emerging market insights and more information from Grok Global Services, please click on the green banner below. And until next time, signing out from the Pi. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.